Hello, so today I'm talking about the difference between analog audio and digital audio. So for my final individual project, I'm going to attempt to recreate some classic analog vocal production with current digital equipment that I have. So rather than using a console and physical hardwares, I'm going to be using plugins and a DAW on my computer. So that's why I thought it was appropriate to talk about this topic for my research project. So here we go. So every sound starts off as analog. Right now, I'm speaking in a room by myself, and I can hear my voice coming straight from my mouth. That's an analog sound since it's not being reproduced and computed through a digital signal. Well, what you're hearing is a digital signal. It's going through Zoom, through a video, it's being processed into zeros and ones, and it's reproducing it through speakers on your end. So a sound is almost always starting off as analog, whether it's voice, a stringed instrument, a percussion instrument. It's pretty much always analog going into a microphone, into an audio interface, and then to wherever it will go after that. It usually always starts off analog. So the difference between analog and digital audio is actually the way that the information is stored. Analog audio is stored by creating a series of magnetic charges along a reel of magnetic tape, whereas digital audio stores audio information as a series of numeric values on a hard drive. So you can look at an audio waveform that was created using an analog workflow as one continuous sine wave that isn't blocked off or broken up at all. It is one constant sound. Now, digital audio is actually a reproduction digitally of the analog sound. So the sound is going into a microphone, into an audio interface, and then being interpreted in your DAW or DAW. So with digital audio, you have what's called a sample rate, and a sample rate determines how many samples are taken of a sound wave per second. A sample rate is measured in hertz, and recording at a higher sample rate will allow higher frequencies to be recorded. And with analog sounds, you don't have this. There is no distance in between each of these samples. It's one continuous actual analog sound. So during playback of a digital recording, the samples are converted back into electrical signals and then sent out to your speakers. And this is performed by what's called a digital to analog converter, a D2A converter, or a DAC. And with an analog signal, you don't have any of these conversions. It's analog all the way through, from the recording to what you hear through the speakers. So knowing this, you might assume that an analog signal is a more true-to-life, more genuine representation of what the artist was actually recording in the studio. And you might be right in some cases, but not always. As you can imagine, when you're comparing digital audio to analog audio, they each can have their upsides and their downsides. Neither analog or digital recordings have an advantage over each other when it comes to frequency range. The limit of human perception of sound usually limits itself around 44.1 kilohertz, which is the standard for digital recordings, and analog recordings go just a little bit beyond this. But digital can go up to 96 and beyond just to be more flexible when working with them digitally. The major drawback to analog audio recording is that it has a significantly higher noise floor when you're comparing it to digital technology. This is the cause of a hissing sound when listening to analog recordings. Digital audio technology doesn't really have this issue because it's much more modern and you don't have to deal with magnetic signals being passed through on a piece of tape. So not only do analog media such as tape and vinyl contain inherent noise, but they're also extremely vulnerable to degradation over time. This is why you hear people say things like, "Oh, you sound like a broken record." And also records can skip from time to time. So when you buy a new vinyl record or a new tape and you listen to it for the first time, that's the best that it will ever sound. It will eventually degrade in quality over time because it is a physical media. Digital media like hard drives and CDs are much more resilient because they can be duplicated without loss in quality. Another huge benefit to the digital world is that media is portable and reproducible. So you can store it on a hard drive or an iPod or an iPhone, and you can carry thousands upon thousands of songs right in your pocket. The files can be sent across the internet in just a few seconds, and nobody wants to carry around a bunch of vinyl records and a record player just to listen to their music on the go. The same is true when it comes to recording digital media. You can download audio plugins off the internet, you can create everything on a single screen in a computer, and you don't have to have giant, bulky audio recording equipment. You just need a simple computer, a keyboard, a mouse, possibly a microphone and an audio interface, and that's about it. So there's a huge debate online. People are always arguing whether digital is better or analog is better, and the truth is that there is no one correct answer. Analog and digital audio are both different kinds of tools, and there are different scenarios in which you wouldn't need to use each of these tools, right? So digital is the new age. When computers came along, the audio world came with it. Analog audio is widely considered obsolete by today's standards, considering that digital products are cheap and accessible to everyone, and analog is big, bulky, and way too expensive for the common music producer or musician. Digital products have presets and they're easy to learn, and sometimes they have algorithms that can help even a novice audio engineer create something that sounds really, really good and for not a lot of money. But some people argue that analog has more character. There's more genuine harmonic distortion. And harmonic distortion, even though it sounds bad, is actually a good thing. Sometimes it can kind of EQ and compress things for you for free. Analog can give you a dirty sound that you just simply can't recreate with digital sometimes. And while digital can sometimes give you more control over what you're recording, occasionally you'll want to emulate that dirty sound of an analog recording and just not want to deal with digital plugins and software. Andrew Scheps said it best when he said, "The only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers." They're just two totally different ways to do things. So I'll finish up this video by discussing emulation and how we can recreate an analog sound using a digital audio workstation and workflow. So like I said earlier, I plan on, for my final individual project, choosing a few songs from before the digital age and trying to recreate the vocal production and performance using only digital audio software and plugins. So some of the best minds in audio production have come together with some really good software engineers and created plugins that are made to emulate classic analog gear. An example of this would be the CLA-2A or the CLA-76 compressors by Waves. This is a classic compressor with a very distinct sound, and it's been used on hundreds and hundreds of records. So when developing this plugin, it was crucial for Waves to get it just right. It had to sound exactly like the original. Luckily, Waves was praised for the accuracy of this emulation, and it seems like they got it just right. Universal Audio also makes some of my favorite emulator plugins, and I plan on using them in my project. There are tons and tons of emulator plugins, and sometimes there are good ones that are built right into your DAW when you download it that come with the software for free. So I don't think I'll be able to get my digital emulations to sound exactly like analog gear, but I think I'll be able to get it close enough to where I don't have to spend a lot of money, and anybody who's just a casual listener won't be able to tell the difference. So digital audio workflows are the norm today. They're more cost-effective, more accessible than ever, and way more convenient than analog ever was. I hope that you can now see some of the similarities between analog and digital and why we as a society have moved towards digital, but I hope you can also appreciate analog audio workflows and understand why producers today still want to emulate and recreate the sounds of yesterday. Thanks so much for watching.